Hello, everybody. Ron Callis here with One Firefly and another episode of Automation Unplugged. Uh, this is episode, I'm actually going to cheat here. There we go. This is episode number 98. We're getting up there. We're almost at 100. And let me go ahead and check our friendly Facebook feed and let me see if, in fact, we are live. So bear with me here. And it does appear that we are live. Okay, so today is Wednesday, February 12th. It is a little bit after 12:30, closer to 12:40, as I often do. I was fighting some technology gremlins, but I beat them down, and we were able to make everything, the technology behave. So here we are. I am super excited to bring you a guest. Some of you certainly have heard about this person's involvement in the news because the company he's associated with has been in the news quite a bit over the last few years. So, without further ado, I'm going to jump right into my interview with Nigel. And I'm going to make sure I pronounce his last name. He's going to correct me, but Nigel Dessau. And if I got that wrong, he'll tell us here in just a moment. Let me go ahead and bring him in. Nigel.
Hi, and no, perfect pronunciation, exactly right.
Exactly right. All right. You know
Yeah.
what? If I was a good host, I would have asked you for clarification before I pressed the go live button. But I appreciate that.
Well, some people say Dessau, some people Dessau. It's the French or the German, but traditionally we're the German version of that. So Dessau is the way,
Dessau.
which is what you said.
Awesome. Well, lovely. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So, Nigel, you are the CMO of Bravas, and certainly our industry has been hearing about Bravas. You know, the 15 integrators from around the country that have come together, initially coached and guided by Paul and Steve over at Vital Management. Um, and so and you in particular have this really interesting background that's so diverse and perhaps unique, at least from what I'm normally used to coming across. So for our audience of technology industry professionals, custom integration professionals, tell us about yourself and kind of where you come from.
Well, I think the first thing people have probably spotted is I don't have a traditional American accent. I actually live in Austin, Texas, and if I'm being
Oh,
annoying,
so that's an Austin accent that
I
I'm
I,
hearing.
I often describe it as East Texas,
East
or
Tech. Okay.
very East Texas. So I was born in the UK. I spent most of my career in and out of high technology companies, including 20 years at IBM and then various other places since then. And it's really been more in a B2B world. It's been about bringing an external view of the market in. But for the last 10, 15 years, I either create or boot or reboot marketing teams. And that's what I've really been focused on.
Now, you mentioned some big names there, so I want to go through that a little bit slower. What are some of the on your resume, if you will? What are some of those bigger brands and Fortune 500 companies that you've been associated with?
Yeah, so as I said, IBM in both the UK and the US. I spent the first 10 years of my life actually as a sales rep in the field, so doing what I class as a more honest job than many. So I've carried a bag, I've shaken hands, I've known what that experience is like. I came to the US with IBM and then joined a storage company called Storage Tech, who got acquired by Sun. So I went through an acquisition experience. From Sun, I went to a company called Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, where I was the chief marketing officer for a few years. And then
AMD, the chip manufacturer,
the
the,
chip
the the
manufacturer.
big, huge monster chip manufacturer.
Yes, I mean that was my favorite marketing budget of all time was about $400 million a year. So that's was a fun marketing budget to have.
Did you ever struggle like trying to find ways to spend 400 million?
In that sort of industry, what happens is about three-quarters of it goes through MDF and funds like that, co-marketing funds. So you're down to only having $25 million a quarter. And so of that, we had no problem spending. AMD is interesting because it's Well, it's a B2B company. It's also a B2B2C company. So you've got to understand enough, pretty much like this industry, of what the consumer wants if you're able to work with your business partners. And that idea that industry isn't B2B and B2C, it's really B2B2C, is something that I've focused on for years.
And you were brought into this Bravas situation, I want to say by the investment company originally as a consultant and helping looking at the whole deal. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's fine. The PE, the private equity company Presidio, who funded this merger of the 15, I'm connected to that through one of their partners, and they asked me to look at the Bravas marketing strategy because the marketing strategy of a $3 to $5 million custom integrator in a town or a city around the country, and that of a $75 to $100 million national brand are different, and the requirements are different, and the scale is different, and on what you should think about is different. And so I did some consulting work for the team, gave my recommendations, and one of the things I offered to do was to help them find a good marketing leader to run the marketing play. And to be honest with you, I talked to Ryan, who is the CEO, and said, actually, I think I found that person and it's me. Because I think it's a great opportunity. I think there's all sorts of fun things about this, and I'd love to play that role.
Oh, that's so I'm very curious. So you have this super interesting outsider's role as it relates to, the custom integrator space. So many of the people in the custom integration industry come from within the custom industry or the custom technology industry. And for me, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and so I'll see friends and industry peers, and they'll move from one company to the other, but they'll generally stay inside the bubble. And you're coming from outside, and so I'm curious, just what are some of your general perceptions about custom integrators and the industry at large, and maybe what do you see as the opportunities here?
So I think the single most interesting thing going on in this industry is what I call consumerization. And it's going to cause a huge squeeze. So if you think about most technology businesses, so maybe a silly example, but I remember my mother bought a new vacuum cleaner when I was younger, and she went to the store, she got to meet the salesperson, she got to check the salesperson's references, and it was a 6 month purchase to buy a vacuum cleaner. Our vacuum cleaner broke yesterday. We went to Amazon.com, and the biggest question for us was, what color do we want it? And that's really the world of consumerization. And I think that sort of consumerization is hitting the lower end of this market, where whether it's Ring Doorbell, whether it's Nest, that's starting to really eat up, where I think people are going to be challenged either rightly or wrongly by what people think they can do themselves or consumers can do themselves. So that's causing a shift, and not only a shift in the products that are available for market, but more importantly, the expectations of the end client. And what consumerization really does is change the knowledge of the consumer when they're making purchase decisions. And if you think about what that's done in laptops and cell phones and all those other businesses, that's going to change the way people acquire services from custom integrators. And that's going to radically change how custom integrators are going to have to respond.
So, if you don't mind, I'm super curious. Walk me down the road a little bit further. So, what does that mean for the technology integrator, whether they're in Bravas or not? Just the
Yeah.
general, the thousands of technology integrators throughout the world, but the 5 or 10,000 here in North America. What does that mean for them, or at least within your vision, what does that mean for them?
Well, let me take you on a bit of a journey if I can, because I think
Please.
this is a good way to tell the story. So, if I put up a picture of a Model T Ford, everyone's going to recognize a Model T Ford, and they're going to, and I'm going to say, tell me what do you think about a Model T Ford? And everyone typically, when you do that, says you can have it in any color that you want as long as it's black. So Model T Fords emerged in a time when product was the significant differentiator. If you either had the product, you didn't, there wasn't a lot of variety. The second phase is when sales became the most important differentiator in the industry. So you had product, but if you could blanket the world with salespeople, which sort of IBM did in the early days of computers, not the best product could be replaced by an improved sales force. The third phase, I think, was around mass marketing. So Windows 95 was the first people to really do this, which was to blow everybody else out of the market by just mass marketing. And it didn't matter if you had a better sales force, it didn't matter if you had a better product, they mass marketed. The phase we're moving into now is an experience one, where you've got to give the right experience to the client. That experience is how they acquire, how they research, how they acquire, how they buy, and how they support their products. So it doesn't matter if you're shipping the best speaker, the best TV, the best wireless system. It doesn't matter if your sales force is 5 times larger or 5 times better. It doesn't matter if you've actually got the best marketing. What matters is, can you give the end client the best experience? And so some of the things we've done in the industry around, hit and run product installs, lack of support, giving
Sometimes
products.
on occasion, challenges finishing that last 5%.
Yeah, exactly. All of that stuff will become the overriding thing that affects a business. So you've got to ask yourself is, how does the experience affect the way I acquire my clients, the way they learn about me, the way I sell to them, the installation process, and then the support process afterwards. And that's the sort of 360 experience view you're going to have as a market consumerizes. And if you don't think that's true, think about us buying a vacuum cleaner on Amazon yesterday from the way we researched, bought, acquired, used. And you know what? If we don't like it, we'll refund it and they'll pay for the packaging. That's the experience that's going to happen, and it's more than just in retail.
Now, what is your perspective as it relates to there's a big difference between buying a vacuum cleaner and buying a fully integrated system, which is requiring of a diligent process with scoping and discovery, designing, engineering, installing, and ultimately servicing that customer. How does that differ from, say, doing research on a toaster? And what is that experience that the integrator needs to be delivering or being mindful of today versus maybe in the past, where I'm going to say maybe you're saying it mattered less in the past and it's changing?
So I don't think it's as different as you think it is. I think we want to think it's different, but it really isn't. And and so let's take the end of that process, which is the installation, the last five, the last mile, the last 5%
Sure.
support. How when a client has a problem with something you've installed, are you going to support that? We're so used to, being able to call Amazon and have someone pick up the phone, being able to get instant responses. I'll be back to you in 3 days isn't sufficient. Now, if you work that back up the chain, people want to, 70, 80% of everything people buy nowadays, they research. So when you go in and say, I'm going to install speaker A or I'm going to television B, you've got to expect people to go, why? That's not what my best friends, that's not what our neighbors bought. And some of that has always been going on, and I get that. But the power of the experience about how you explain why you've got and the resources you give them to make that decision are very similar, and that world is speeding up. So, well, it feels different from buying a toaster on Amazon. There's a lot to learn that experience is going to be the same.
So in doing my research, Nigel, before bringing you on as a guest, I was reminded that you authored a book, and I'm looking over your head and I see the number 21.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'm gonna put that piece of art up on the screen. And this is in fact a book that you authored. Now, I'm going to say, was this what you were doing prior to being brought into the Bravas organization? And now, of course, you're positioned as the CMO of that company. Or when did this book, which I have not read, but now that I know it exists, I'm going to read it. And in fact, it looks like maybe a great giveaway for members of my leadership team and my staff. Can you tell me about this book and how that fits into the ecosystem here of your past?
Yeah, so I started this about 10 years ago. I was stuck in Dallas Fort Worth Airport in a storm, and bored waiting for my flight. I wandered into the bookshop and thought, well, let's find a good leadership book. And what I saw was every leadership book was written by someone who was fundamentally a leader in the last century. So they're all great people, but the challenges of the 21st century are, in terms of leadership and management and retaining and teams, are really very significantly different in terms of the technology and globalization and all those sorts of things. So I actually started a website called the 3 Minute Mentor, where I just started doing 3 minute videos. There's about 130 of them up there now.
Is
And
that website live right
it
now?
is. It's then the number 3minutementor.com.
All right, I'm gonna,
And
for my audience here that's watching at least, I'm gonna grab the website and I'm gonna put it in a scroller on the screen. And for those that are listening, if you go to the show page afterwards on our website, onefirefly.com, you'll see it in the show notes.
thank you. And so over the time, what we found was about 36 plus of the episodes were more watched than any other. So we took those 36 episodes and turned them into this book. And it's not a hard tone for reading. I would tell you the 36 chapters probably take 10, 15 minutes, and they're designed for very practical use. And to be honest with you, the ideas mostly come from those who've been kind enough to mentor and tutor me over the years. And so it's really about passing this on. But if we connect it back to the Bravas in our industry, um, you know, there's a huge change in the way people have to hire and retain. And what the millennials want, the Gen Ys, are not what maybe we wanted when we started all those years ago. And so some of this may be useful for people climbing up their careers.
Well, let's dig into that. So I employ quite a few millennials. Not, I mean, I hire a diverse team, a very diverse team in terms of ages and backgrounds and even where they live. Um, what are some of the, are you willing to share a few nuggets from that role or from those mentorship videos or content that you drafted?
Yeah, so I think the first part of the set, and there's a bunch of underlying themes that live all the way through the content, but mostly when people who are early on in their career say to you, well, how do I build a career? How do I, I've got my degree, I've got my BA, and I've even got my MBA and stuff, but I don't seem to have a career. What am I doing? I always tell them that you've really got to focus on three things first. What I call content, approach, and network. And so what we care about in the people that we hire is what content do they come with? What do you know? And then the second thing is approach. How do you use what you know? Then invariably networking is who knows that you can use what you know. And so I always tell people, as you're building a career, focus on content, approach, and network. And then there are other things like presence and hunger and that you can add in after that. But so that's the sort of idea. And so the first few chapters are about how do I acquire content? How do I get approach? How do I get networking? And as you start to do this, it's a bit like a video game. If you move too fast without getting all the appropriate things at the right level, it's hard to play at the next level. And that's what the book's designed to help with.
Do you have more books in you? Is this one of what might be more forthcoming, or?
I think I'd sort of stopped doing the episodes a while ago, but what I'm getting some requests for now is a slightly different approach. So we're looking at launching a new series, sort of the 3 Minute Mentor Unplugged, which is a slightly more focused on the people whose careers have stalled, and how do you do a career reboot, and what are the things that you should think about if you want to accelerate or drive your career and it's not going where you think it's going. And that particularly plays, I think, to a millennial audience who there's a lot of bad analogies with attendance trophies, but there is an element of, I've come in every day, I've done what you've asked me. Why am I not the director or the VP yet? And and some of that I think is what I get a lot of requests to talk about.
So, and I know I'm jumping around, and you're being a great sport. So, thank you for being flexible as we jump into a
My
number of
pleasure.
different topics. But I want to jump back into Bravas, and as my headphone jumps out, jump back into Bravas, and what's lined up? What's next for Bravas? What's the exciting next steps? Where do you want to take Bravas, and what do you see as the really the growth opportunity within our space?
So I think for Bravas, first of all, I think, the 15 have come together. We're in 13 locations. I hope we will add more locations over the next few years. At the moment, we're sort of 13 businesses running independently. And so what we'll be paying off on the next few weeks and months is bringing that together as both a national and a local body. I mean, there's an interesting balance here between having a national brand and not losing the local identity, because as we all know, that's where the business really happens. And there's websites to be updated, something we're talking about,
Yeah.
and other materials to try and play off on that. And so I think we have to play out the value of the national brand without losing the local brand. I think the other thing is there's a context shift here towards health and wellness, and we have to work our way through how we tell that story. Bravas is at the high end of the luxury space, and there's a shift in the way those people are buying and what they care about. We need to play to that.
I think one question that I have, just having been only in this space for the last 20 years, and it's a question mark, and I'm curious where you stand, is the wellness conversation, is it a shift or is it a trend, or is it a shift or is it a fad? And I'm going to just juxtapose this to say I was interviewed by City Pro back in 2010 for some bio or coverage, and they had asked me very directly about 3D TV, and my perception at that time was it was a fad, and I just couldn't see it lasting. Is interesting. About 1 or 2 years later, it was all but not talked about. I don't have such an opinion on wellness. In fact, I've started practicing some of the benefits of technology enhancing your lifestyle at home myself. But I am curious whether or not the consumers are going to be receiving it. I know the dealers are starting to dish it out, and I'm speaking of the message.
Yeah.
What I don't know is if it's being received and resonating.
So I think the 3D TV is a good example. I mean, part of what killed 3D TV, as we know, was a complete lack of content. But mostly the experience made no sense in a home context. I mean, I have to tell you, I visited the home of a very wealthy Hollywood producer. I won't tell you whose name it was, and he had a 3D TV that didn't require glasses. And you know what? That was a great way to watch animated movies. The animated three, because it was an incredibly, it was a $75,000 television as well. So in those days, so that really wasn't that big, but the lack of content and the experience is wrong. I think what's different about the health or wellness, and there's a lot of definition to be done, and I think the industry is going about it pretty much the worst way they could, by the way, at this point, is you've got to come from outside in, not inside out. It's not about how you push the product, which I think is what the 3D manufacturers were doing, 3D TV manufacturers doing, but by tuning into what the high end of the client market is looking for, in terms of health and wellness, and then tuning your experience to that. And so it's sort of, if you do it the opposite way than 3D TVs, I think you'll have a different experience, because you'll be tuning into a need that's out there that if you don't fulfill, then somebody else will.
No, that makes sense. What is striking you, as with all of your different industries and background? the industries you've worked in and your very diverse background in both in sales and marketing, what are you seeing as some very obvious lessons that this industry could learn, or that you plan to benefit the Bravas companies now that you're driving some of the decision making there?
So I think the biggest element which happens in the experience thing is a thing in the sort of marketing world we call going up the stack. So, there's a stack which is, if you build it from the bottoms up, is, hardware, software, services, stuff. And I think we're an industry that has overly relied on the bottom part of that stack to differentiate us. And even within the manufacturers of equipment we talk to, they see what I think we see, which is we're all going up stack. And it'll become about the software and the programming and the services and the after sales service. So collectively, the survivors long term here will. It's not like they'll never sell the products, because everything runs off. If you can't watch your TV, it doesn't matter. But the ability to go up stack, I think, is the thing that will most affect this industry. And I think in time, people, if they don't know how to do that, will struggle.
And what can you? I'm going to ask you to dive a little bit deeper, because you're using language that is very clear to you, but may not be very clear to the audience. What is at the bottom of the stack, and what's at the top of the stack? Can you
So
give
the
a little
bottom of
more
the stack
clarity?
is, yeah, no, the bottom of the stack is reselling hardware, reselling devices. So, we
Selling the
all,
black boxes, pushing the black box solutions.
right. And we all know there will be an inevitable margin squeeze on that. And more, you have to go higher and higher up to still maintain the margins. And again, consumerization is having some effect here. So the lowest part of the stack is just reselling hardware. It's a very low margin, undifferentiated business for most people. The next big chunk of the stack is software, be that software that runs on the hardware, or for us, the programming and the tailoring and the making specific to the home user. And now what I'm start to seeing here is not only selling software, which tends to be a higher profit margin product. I'm now starting to put some services into that, which is the top part of the stack, which is how do I add, service, be that programming services, installation services, after sales services, which is how I build the highest margin product and most differentiate myself. And
Understood.
that's sort of the stack bottom to top.
Uh, from an optics standpoint for Bravas, I want to jump into a little bit of granularity around marketing, just for everyone that I know is reading about Bravas in the news, and or they know, some of the companies that are now a part of the larger family, the larger company. A lot of those local entities, you said there's 13 locations, 15 entities. And when I say locations, call cities. I know there's a couple in Dallas, a couple in Atlanta.
Yeah.
What is your vision for those local brands, whether it be Hi-Fi Sales in Cherry Hill, or Smart Systems down in Dallas? What is your vision for when those brands by name are less than, and maybe not known as that name, and they're known as locations of Bravas, and optically website, social media, like that whole? And you're also going to be absorbing new brands into the company. You're going to be making additional acquisitions. What is your timeline, or how do you see that rolling out, or is that all fully defined and or public?
So
Don't disclose anything that isn't appropriate for the
no,
audience.
I mean, I would tell you, if we were talking this time next year and you were still using the previous company names, then I've sort of failed. But uh, this isn't a top-down marketing effort. This is a bottoms-up marketing effort, because it's in those cities, be it Atlanta, be it Boca Raton, be it Baltimore. It's in those cities where the real work happens and the real relationship happens. And the job of the marketing team, which is just two of us, is to support and enable them and help them, get through a sales cycle faster by providing assets and tools that help them do that. Having said that, there's no value long term to create equity in those previous company names. So we'll plan over the first year of the company to, as much as we can, transition away from those towards Bravas, Baltimore or Bravas, Atlanta, or but for many of our clients, we can't forget that the experience doesn't happen at HQ; it happens in the location. So we're being sensitive to that and making sure we're still a local business in the local market, with the local team is being run by the team that was there before. What they have is just access to resources and shared technology they've never had before.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. Nigel, where anyone listening or watching, where could they see you or meet you in person next?
Well, I think we're going to be at the ProSource event. Often go to Tech Home Builder events. I'm really easy to find if you need to email me. I'm Nigel@bravas.com. So I'm easy to find there, or at the 3 Minute Mentor website, wherever it is. But if someone needs something, they should just email me at Nigel@bravas.com.
All right, I'm going to put that on the screen. Did I get that right?
You got that exactly right.
Nigel@bravas.com. Well, Nigel, it was a pleasure having you on Automation Unplugged. Again, I got to look at, I think it's episode 98.
Congratulations.
No, thank you.
That's
Thank you.
no, look, the starting podcast is not the hard bit. It's keeping them going. So congratulations.
It's all about consistency. Hell or high water, we do our best to get a show out. So, Nigel, thank you, sir. And I'll see you in a few weeks. And I'm trying to think, where is ProStar? It's in Vegas.
It's in Vegas, baby.
All right. My wife was just downstairs ordering me a mask so that when I get on the airplane, I don't pick up the latest flu.
Well, we're not shaking hands anymore. We're fist pumping.
That's it. No, there's new rules of engagement for sure. Certainly for us, those of us that travel.
Exactly.
So, Nigel, it was a pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
All right, guys, gals, thank you for checking out a new show. I am going to put up our artwork. Let me see here if I get this right. There we go. So remember, if you're watching us live, Automation Unplugged is now available in all of your favorite listening places as a podcast. So don't forget to subscribe. Certainly leave us a review or a comment if you feel so inclined. And on that note, I want to thank you for watching and or listening, and I will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.